I wanna ride, I wanna ride, I wanna ride.
Spring is here. Time to get the bike back out on the road. I want to go for a ride today, so I'm going to go through and show you guys my post-winter checks that I do before I put my bike back on the road. Make sure everything's safe and whatever. I use TCLOCS as a guideline. I'm sure there's 100 different steps, procedures, that are out there, but that's just the one that I use. We're going to go through mine today to make sure that this thing is safe and I can get back on the road. First thing I'm going to check is the tire pressure. Now we have to keep in mind that this is a cold tire pressure, and our pressure should be taken warm. And so it's not going to be as high as what it should be. But I want to make sure that I have, my tires aren't flat from sitting all winter. And just check the treads, make sure there's nothing stuck in them. Make sure you got enough tread left. Everything looks good. You can check the wheel bearings for play while you're back here. Make sure all your brake bolts and everything are in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the front. At this point, you're supposed to check your wheels for cracks and all that stuff. Again, check the tires, check for play in the wheel bearings. So while I'm down here, I want to check the brake pads, and you can just look at them here and make sure that there's plenty of life left on them. And the same thing for the rears. Making sure that pad is plenty thick there. Next thing we're going to check is all the controls. We're going to check our clutch lever. Make sure that it pulls freely, doesn't hang up. Brake lever. Once we get the bike on the ground, we'll check the brakes again. We want to check that the bars move freely. Again, once it's running, we'll turn them back and forth and make sure that the idle doesn't change. That would mean that there's tension on the throttle cable. We'll check the throttle. It should snap back. It should operate smoothly and then snap back. We'll check our shift lever. Make sure that it operates freely, clicks up and down. And check our rear brake lever. Again, we'll verify that when we get it on the ground. So what we want to do when we get it on the ground is we'll apply the brake and then we'll push against it. Make sure that it's holding the pressure. Next thing is lights and electrical. I just hooked up my battery. I left it unhooked all winter so that it would have charge. So we'll turn it on and we're going to check all the switches. We'll check our blinkers. My tail light's integrated. Check the headlights. Honestly, I normally don't do this until it's running because it'll kill your battery. But then we want to step on a brake. Make sure the brake light's on. Same thing with the handbrake. You could check the horn. I never check the horn because I never use it. Okay, now we need to take it off the stands. So we're going to put the stand down, make sure that it locks in place. We'll take the front down. And take the rear down. And you want to grab onto something to guide it down onto its stand so it doesn't fall the other way. And now we need to check all our fluids. One thing that I miss on all my Japanese bikes, they had a sight glass, and so you could see the oil level. On this one, it requires that it's warm when you check the oil, and so it's a little disconcerting when you check it cold like this because it's all the way down towards the bottom. But it is fine. I'll warm it up and then I'll check it as I'm supposed to, and it'll be fine. It always is. A little cool tidbit about this bike: the swing arm is actually the oil tank. We check our brake fluid here. It's supposed to be full. My rear brake fluid reservoir requires that the seat's off. And it's right here. Just got to make sure it's above the lower level. And that is the extent of my fluid checks. We'll do another video where we change the primary and the transmission fluid, and I'll show you how to check those. But there's no coolant on this bike, so if you have a bike that's water cooled, then you need to check your coolant level as well. And then the next thing that we're supposed to check for is leaks. I can pretty much assure you that you will not develop leaks over the winter, because what causes the leaks is the oil drains to the bottom of the pan, and the seals sit here with no lubricant, and then they dry out, and then when you go for your first ride, what's going to happen is those dry, cracked seals are going to leak. So we're going to do the leak check after we get back. So the next things we have to check are chassis. So we're going to make sure that the suspension travels freely, it doesn't bind, things like that. So we'll rock on the suspension. Also, now we can check our brake operation. So apply the brake and attempt to push the bike, it doesn't move. Apply the rear brake, same thing, it doesn't move. And then we're going to check everything over, make sure there's no bolts missing, things things that aren't tied down, wires, stuff like that that's not tied down, that should be. This thing does tend to rattle like crazy. It shakes just due to the design of the engine, and so it will rattle bolts loose. Like, I've never used as much Loctite as I've used since I've owned this thing, just because bolts tend to rattle out like crazy. Then we're supposed to check the stand. It's on the stand. The stand seems to function just fine. I do occasionally lube that spring because they like to rust, and the hinge joint there. So now I'm going to go ride it. First I'm going to start it up and warm it up for 4 or 5 minutes while I get my gear on. We want to warm it up, let it warm up nice and slow before we go ripping on it. And then I'm going to go ride it for a good 20-25 minutes. One thing that I forgot to put in my storing your bike for the winter video is that you don't want to start it up until you're ready to run it. What happens is when your engine's cold, it runs very rich, meaning too much fuel. And so what will happen is that it'll cause gunk in your head, and it'll clog up your valves and stuff like that. I've known quite a few guys that once a month in the wintertime, they push it out in the driveway, start it up and run it for 10 or 15 minutes and then put it away. And then later they've got valve issues. So you don't want to start it up until you're ready to go ride it. So what I'm going to do, this is a test ride. I'm going to take it out, I'm going to get the tires and suspension and everything warm, and make sure everything's working right. And then when I get back, I'm going to check for leaks and check the oil level when it's warm and stuff like that. Maybe it's not quite riding season yet, but at least we're ready to go. Hey, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.